Welcome to our first cooking class of 2026 at the Park Slope Food Co-op. We're going to be talking about mushrooms today. My name is William Doran. I'm a member of the cooking squad. We organize these classes the third Wednesday of every month. The only time we don't do it is August and December. So this is our first one this year. I'm going to bring up to the kitchen with me Winson Wong with Afterlife Ag. They're one of our mushroom suppliers. So Winson is here as kind of a mushroom expert to help answer questions as we go along through the class. We're going to be making 3 dishes. One of them is kind of a cheat dish. So the first one is an oyster mushroom ragout. We've got some polenta on the stove that we're going to eat that with. The second recipe is it's a mushroom pâté. It's essentially you take the leftover ragout and put it in the food processor with a little bit of vermouth, and we have some bread, so we're going to try that as our second recipe. And then the last one is a Shiitake Sesame Slaw with some cabbage and some fresh veggies. So we're using a couple different types of mushrooms, and then also cooking them in 2 different ways. Really, the second recipe or the third recipe, we're not actually cooking them at all. So everything's raw, and we'll have a dressing and kind of toss everything together. So I'm going to let Winson just talk a little bit about their farm. This is a hyper-local supplier to the co-op. They're currently located in Bushwick and in the process of moving,
yeah.
right?
Moving into Bushwick, yeah.
Moving into Bushwick, okay.
So, but hi, everyone. My name is Winson Wong. So our farm is called Afterlife Mushrooms. You can find us on Instagram, just literally Afterlife Mushrooms. We're a circular farm based out of Queens in Ridgewood currently. As William said, we're moving to Bushwick very soon in a couple months into a bigger space, actually. We are an indoor farm, and we grow a wide variety of species, oysters. We supply chestnut mushrooms to the co-op, and then a wide variety like lion's mane, enokis, piopinos, etc. And the difference between us is we actually use food scraps to grow our mushrooms. So we take food scraps from restaurants, and then we use that as our substrate to grow mushrooms, and we provide those mushrooms back to these restaurants that work with us all throughout the city. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We've been doing this for like over 4 years now. Definitely want to do even more community engagement and more events going forward. So feel free to follow us and check us out. Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us.
Apparently, if you have other questions growing mushrooms later, I'll be back at the end of the session.
So I may default to Winson if you ask me something about mushrooms that I'm not totally sure about. So he'll be sitting right there and can chime in as we go. And then we'll reserve a little bit of time at the end for kind of a Q&A. So you can ask about the recipes that we're making or anything about mushrooms. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first recipe is an oyster mushroom ragout. So this is an oyster mushroom. So I'm going to show you how to break it down. But essentially, it's very similar to other mushrooms in that it has a cap, a stem, and a base. The oyster mushroom base, which is this kind of denser back part, is a little bit tough, and it can be kind of hard to separate these from it. So what I'm going to do is cut it in half, at least the kind of thick base part, and just sort of pull it apart. And you can really see in cross section the base part that's a little bit denser. So we're going to be removing that and breaking apart the individual stems, and then frying those in a skillet for the first part of this recipe. So I'm going to break these down a little bit more. So I'm trying to kind of free up space to get access to this base so that I can cut it off. And the other thing you should do is save these. You could make a mushroom broth at a later date, with some onions and carrots and things. So we're not going to throw this away. So I'm going to break this down. And then what I'm trying to do is essentially break apart. Are we on the close-up camera? Break apart the mushroom so I have the stem and the cap separated from the base. And this is what we're looking for, to kind of separate these into individual pieces. So the other thing is I have a skillet on medium-high heat. And then I'm going to cook these mushrooms in a dry pan. The first thing we want to do is Mushrooms are like 80 to 90% water. So they're like sponges. And so as I heat these, you'll see that the mushrooms start to look kind of wet as they're releasing the moisture. And we want to get all of that moisture out of the mushrooms so they actually brown and we get some flavor. So I'm going to start laying these in the pan as I break this down. And I don't know if you can hear the sizzle on the Zoom call, but hopefully everybody can hear it here. And so if you're following, folks on Zoom looking at the recipe, we want to kind of get the moisture out of the mushrooms, and then we're going to add oil and salt and brown them, and then add the onions to the pan. And some other seasonings that you'll see in a second. And if the mushrooms start to stick, you can just turn the heat down a little bit. So again, I'm just trying to, break these up into individual stems. There's no oil in the pan right now, but I will have some extra virgin olive oil that I'll add once the moisture comes out of the mushrooms.
Sizzling here at home too.
Huh? Oh, is somebody cooking along? Awesome. Okay. So I don't know if we want to get in close. And this is a cast iron skillet, so I did put a tiny, tiny bit of oil and just kind of rub it on the skillet, which you should be doing anyway to, season your skillet. But for the most part, this was a dry pan. And feel free to chime in with questions in the Zoom or in the room if anybody would like to know anything more about mushrooms or... Yes. So they will be kind of wrinkled up. They're going to shrink in size a lot. Oh, so the question was, how do you know when the mushrooms have released their moisture? So you'll actually see it in the skillet. They'll appear wet. And depending on how many you have in the pan, you don't want to overcrowd the pan because they'll start to sort of boil if too much water comes out. But you want to cook them until it starts to look sort of dry. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Let me make sure this is hot enough.
Angela asked, what other mushrooms can you use?
Really any. And actually I already made some of this that we're going to try at the end of the class. And it has some shiitake in it as well because I had some extra left over. Really, you could use any kind of mushroom. They have, variations in flavor and texture. I find that the oyster mushrooms hold their texture a lot better than, say, like a cremini or a button mushroom. So that's why I like them for this. And they're also just really pretty. They're, big pieces and they look sort of floral almost.
Is this method of dehydrating them before oil or in general for other mushroom recipes?
So the question was, does this method of, dehydrating these or getting the water out of the mushrooms work for other varieties? And the answer is yes. Yeah, all mushrooms are sort of spongy and have some moisture content. And so, you can see now that they look pretty wet and I haven't added oil or anything to the skillet. Yes, but you just have to really watch the heat because if it's too hot, they will start to stick. The question was if you use like a stainless steel or not a non-stick pan, the mushrooms might stick. So you want to just monitor the heat. And if you really have to, you could always, if some get stuck to the bottom, I'll even add a little bit of water and kind of loosen them up. But controlling the heat is a good way to prevent them from sticking. All right, I'm going to check time. Okay, we're only 10 minutes in, so we're doing pretty good. So these you can really see are getting pretty wet. They're, cooking off some of their moisture. Mm-hmm. So somebody in the audience mentioned that you can see all the steam. So that is literally the water, cooking off of the mushrooms. Any other questions so far? It's definitely not rocket science. So the question was, what would happen if you did put oil in first? The mushrooms would release their moisture, but it would sort of mix with the oil and they'd end up kind of steaming or boiling instead of really getting nice color and browning when I add the oil later, is what I found. And you can also now smell them, or at least people here. Sorry for those of you at home, you'll have to imagine, unless you're cooking along. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add, it's a 1/4 cup of olive oil that the recipe calls for. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And you can really hear it starting to sizzle now. I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, which I'm also going to eyeball. So typically I like to use Diamond Crystal. It's kind of fluffier salt. The question was, what kind of salt are we using? I like it because you can control the amount of salt a little bit better. It's not as dense as like regular table salt. So, yeah, so the flakes are a little bit bigger. So in the recipe, if you are using just regular table salt, you only want to use about half the amount. And it says that in the recipe if you're following along. So now the mushrooms are really starting to kind of fry in the oil. They're starting to brown a little bit. Was there a question in the Zoom?
Yeah, you still rinse the clean mushrooms?
I typically just sort of, so the question was about rinsing or cleaning. I don't really clean them. I just kind of brush any loose dirt off of them. You have to be careful. You can rinse a mushroom, but if it gets wet too long, again, that sponge-like quality, it'll absorb whatever you put it in, which can work to your advantage. So in the slaw recipe that we're doing, the goal is for the mushroom to actually absorb the dressing that we're putting in, whereas here we're trying to get rid of moisture so that they'll brown.
The only thing is just, if you keep any substrate around it, there are, let's say, mushrooms, and you need a substrate, and you can put that non-cooking material.
So in the recipe, it calls for removing these from the pan, but for the sake of time, I'm going to leave them in there, and we're going to add 1 red onion that's diced into about 1/4-inch pieces. Can everybody see? Yeah, you have a really nice view of the pan on the screen.
The recipe didn't specify red and white.
Yeah, you can really use any onion. I like red onions. They tend to be a little bit stronger and they add a nice color. When you're trying to make a ragu that's really sort of savory and cooked down, and you'll see too that when we get to the rest of the ingredients, there's a little bit of, this isn't in the recipe, but I'm going to add some tomato paste because I was experimenting with it earlier. And it adds a nice like depth of flavor. There's also a little bit of cocoa powder in this, unsweetened. And so all of those things add to that kind of depth of flavor and color. So red onions, help in that regard. But you don't have to use red. You can use white, yellow. Even like a sweet onion could be really good. It would add some, some sweetness to the recipe.
And I said, I'm adding white onion. YOLO. Yeah.
Yes, you only live once. Why not use white onion? Okay, we're doing okay. No, I haven't added anything except salt. So it's mushrooms, salt, olive oil, and some red onion. So this, similar to with the mushrooms, We're trying to kind of sweat the onions a little bit, get some of the moisture out so they brown and get some flavor. I'm going to turn the heat up on this just a little bit. I'm used to a gas stove at home, so using an electric burner, there's always a little bit of a learning curve if you don't know your stove very well. All right, so while that's going, let me look back at our recipe. So we've got mushrooms in the pan. So we did oil, salt. The other thing I forgot to do is some chili flake. This is Aleppo pepper, which has a really nice kind of chili pepper flavor without adding a ton of heat. So I really like to use this in cooking. I do like spicy food, but this gives you a little bit more control and it's not quite as intense. So this is a half a teaspoon. Again, I measured for the recipe, but typically that's not how I cook, so we're doing this a little bit ad hoc. The good thing about a ragu recipe is you can follow the recipe, you know, mark by mark and do everything the way it says, but it is also a very forgiving recipe. As long as you cook it and it browns and you cook it down long enough so that the mushrooms and the onions are soft, it's going to taste good. All right, so our chili flakes are in there. Onions are in. So the other thing that you'll notice happens is as this is cooking and in the hot pan, little bits of the onions and mushrooms will start to kind of stick to the bottom and brown, which is great. You want that, but you want to absorb all of that into the dish. So we're going to add a little bit of just dry red wine. The recipe calls for Pinot Noir, but this is this Zinfandel that I bought today. So it's a half a cup of red wine. And you can hear it, you know, sizzling. And what you want to do is use your spatula to kind of scrape up any of the brown bits that, you know, kind of stuck to the bottom of the pan. You know, whenever you add liquid to a skillet, the process is called deglazing, when it sort of loosens up all that stuff that's on the bottom, and you want all of that good flavor to come into the dish. So we've got the wine. We're also adding a little bit of soy sauce. If you're gluten-free, tamari is soy sauce that does not have gluten, which is what we're using in this. And again, I'm not really measuring. You can go off of the recipe. So we have our wine, our soy sauce, and then I'm also going to add just a little bit of just some tap water. And really the process for this recipe, when you get to the last few steps, you're cooking it down, adding water, letting it kind of dry out a little bit, adding a little bit more water, continuing to cook it, and really to kind of get to the desired consistency. So depending on, you know, your preference, if you want it to be really stewy and soft and cooked down, you can cook it much longer, and the flavors will intensify as you do that. But it's really kind of up to your preference how you you know, you want the final dish to come out. So I've added some water. We're also going to add a little bit of grated garlic. Let me turn this up, the water. You have to be careful with water because it can cool off your pan and slow down the cooking a little bit. So I'm going to let that kind of simmer. Is there a question?
Is grated garlic the same as minced?
Not quite. So grated is a little bit finer, and I find there's something about grating. I really like to use what's called a microplane. That it changes the way that garlic tastes, and it's because of, I guess, the way that it sort of breaks up the, you know, the cellular structure of the garlic. So when you use, this is called a microplane, but you could also use like the finest setting or side on a like a box grater. It sort of turns the garlic into almost like a paste, and I find that depending on when you add it to a dish also affects the flavor. if you put the raw garlic in right at the end, just so that it kind of warms up, you'll have a much more intense flavor. But if you put it in earlier and let it cook down, it'll really kind of mellow out. So that's one way that you can sort of control the way that a dish is flavored, is even just when you put ingredients into the pot or the pan. So I'm gonna get a clove of garlic. I think is it one? Let's see. No, two. You want like, I think it says a teaspoon or a tablespoon in the recipe. We're gonna use two. The other thing you'll notice about garlic is if the head is a little bit older, it's actually easier to peel. When garlic is super, super fresh, it can be difficult to peel. So I'm just kind of squeezing these until the peel kind of releases. And then I just take the microplane and rub the garlic across it, keeping the kind of harder sort of root end facing towards me, and then I'll just get rid of that piece at the end. And then I'll flip this over in a second so you can see what the back looks like. So there's your grated garlic. So we'll do two of these. And you can adjust this too. If you really, really like garlic, you can use 3 or 4 cloves. Okay, so we're going to put all of that into the skillet. I'm also going to do a teaspoon of tomato paste, which is not in the recipe. We're adding this. All right, so we got tomato paste. We're going to do the cocoa powder, which is a half a teaspoon. Definitely 3 cloves. Yeah, somebody in the Zoom said that. Yeah, they're all different sizes depending on, how big this one's a little bit smaller than the ones that I put in. Okay, what else? Garlic, cocoa powder, a little bit of vinegar. It's like a teaspoon. This is champagne vinegar, but any kind of white wine vinegar. You could even use balsamic, which is a little bit more intense, so you might not want to use as much. The cocoa powder adds kind of a deep sort of richness. It's not sweetened, so it's not going to taste like a chocolate bar. And in fact, if I didn't tell you there was chocolate in it, you probably wouldn't really notice. Yeah, if you pay attention to, like, in chili recipes or even mole, cocoa powder is a main ingredient of a lot of savory dishes. All right, so we're kind of getting our garlic down in there, breaking up that tomato paste. Onions are getting soft. The water is starting to evaporate a little bit. All right, I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. And then let's make sure we've got all of our steps. We've got cocoa powder, garlic, some fresh thyme we can throw in at the end. But essentially the recipe's done at this point. The mushrooms are brown, the onions are cooked, all of our seasonings are in. If you're cooking at home, you could taste it at this point, see if it needs a little bit of salt. Taste some of the onions, see if they're still maybe a little too crunchy, kind of check the texture. And if you'd like it to be softer, you can let it continue to cook. If the pan starts to get a little bit dry, you can add some more water to get it to sort of a stewy, sort of saucy consistency. The tomato paste was like a heaping teaspoon. We'll add it to the show notes, or modify the recipe that we have online, so that that we added some tomato paste. I guess it goes to show you it's kind of a lesson in that recipes and cooking are a creative endeavor.
Can you explain where you find the recipe?
Yeah, so if you go to foodcoopcooks.org, there are web pages for each of the classes that we host. You can also, if you just click on the RSVP button, it'll take you to Eventbrite, and the recipes and information from our previous classes and upcoming classes is all on there.
You can search by the recipe, or do you have to know?
I'm not sure actually. I think we might. Do we have a search bar on our website? I don't know. I'm asking our team members. These, well, so the parts that are closer to the bottom, so the question was, do you discard these or can you use them? It can be really dense at the bottom and sort of rubbery. So typically what I'll do is I'll save these, like throw them in the freezer, and you can make a mushroom stock at a later date. You know, throw it in a pot with some water with onions. You could throw some garlic, some carrots in there, celery. And once you accumulate enough mushroom scraps, or even mushrooms that are getting kind of dried out and maybe you don't want to, you know, cook them or serve them in something that you're making at home, you can throw them in a stock pot and make a mushroom broth. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and we're going to let this kind of cook in the background on the stove over there. And then we're going to make some pâté. Okay, Rana, are you ready for me?
Smelling absolutely delicious at home.
Good. So somebody said it's smelling absolutely delicious at home. All right, I'm going to unplug this burner and get it out of our way. I didn't realize how loud it was. It's quiet now. Okay, let's put this here. That's okay. We're going to make some noise with a food processor now. Oh, I guess I did forget one thing. So I have some fresh thyme here, and I might actually ask Rana to sort of pluck some of these leaves, and we can, I'll just quickly demonstrate that. With thyme can be kind of a pain in the butt to get it because the stems are really woody. So if you can isolate one and kind of grab it by the tippy top, like if it grew this way, and then pull down backwards down the stem, you can get all of the leaves off pretty easily. So I don't know if you can see that on the, and that's what we're gonna, yes, I can do it again for the close-up cam. So you grab the tip and then sort of pull down, oh, it might break. Pull down backwards like against the grain of the leaves, and they'll all come off of the, okay. So I'm gonna give you that. Thank you.
How much time?
Thyme is just a couple teaspoons of leaves. You can kind of do it to taste. Okay, I'm gonna make us a little bit of space here. So the second recipe is sort of a cheat recipe. It's you know, it's the ragu, but blended in a food processor with a little vermouth to make an appetizer. If you didn't want to make the ragu, you could skip straight to the pâté. So just follow this recipe, let it let it cool, and then when you're ready, and this is just a small food processor. So this is some leftover from what I made earlier today. We're gonna pour it into the food processor. And it really does not take very long. I'm doing this backwards so that everybody can see. And then maybe we can do the close up when it's done. So you can get a sense of, you know, the texture. I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to this too. And some vermouth to give it some more flavor. So this is just dry white vermouth. I'm only doing like a couple of teaspoons. And you can kind of do this to taste. And then we'll also do a little bit of olive oil. And then we have some bread sliced up for us to try this. And then what I might do is I'm gonna grab a bowl and pour it out just so you can see so you guys can see the texture. So it's pretty thick and spreadable, but it's great as a dip. You can spread it on bread. You can dip some crudité in this. And that concludes recipe number 2. Okay, I'm going to set this aside. All right, for our last trick, we're going to make a salad. I'm calling it a slaw because it's a lot of cabbage. Let me get a bowl. So what we're going to do first is make a dressing. So this is all just prep work. There's no cooking. We're going to slice up some shiitake mushrooms. I've already chopped all the cabbage and peppers just to save time. And then lots of fresh herbs. So we'll have mint and cilantro. And then the dressing is, it's a sesame dressing with some soy sauce in it, some toasted sesame oil, and a little bit of tahini to kind of give it some creaminess and body. So let me grab my notes. And I'm just going to double this because we have a lot of ingredients so that we can feed everybody. So the recipe calls for 4 tablespoons of vinegar. So instead of 4, we're going to do 8. Let me find my rice vinegar and my tablespoon. Things are getting a little chaotic up here. All right, so I'm doing 8 tablespoons of vinegar. And with any vinaigrette, you're going to have some acidity that gives you flavor. And then you're going to have fat. And then the key is really using a whisk to emulsify everything, because fat and other liquids tend to not want to, hang out together. They want to separate. And so when you agitate it with the other ingredients, it emulsifies and becomes a dressing. The tahini also, because it has some fat in it and it's kind of creamy, also helps kind of bring everything together so that it stays cohesive as a dressing. I lost count. I think this is number 5. Thank you. 6, 7, 8. And then we have 6 teaspoons of soy sauce, although my teaspoon is covered in tomato paste. So I'm going to rinse it. I could do that. I'm going to just rinse this just to make sure that I'm following the recipe. Or we'll invent something new and put some tomato paste in it. All right, so I'm doing 6 of these since there's 3 in the recipe. The other thing we're going to do for this is we're going to grate some more garlic, and I'm also going to grate some ginger. So a lot of times you'll see that people will sort of peel the ginger. I find that when you grate it on a microplane, the peel kind of disappears and mixes in and you don't really notice it. So we're going to save time and not really mess with that. Let me get this out of the way. So you want like a teaspoon, which translates to roughly like an inch of ginger. So we're doing 2 teaspoons. So I'm doing like roughly a 2-inch piece of ginger. And then we're going to do 2 cloves of garlic. And that piece of garlic does not look so hot. We're not going to use it. There we go. What I really need is a compost bowl to put all my mess in. We're just going to use this container. Here, we'll use 3 cloves of garlic. We'll put a little extra. All right, that feels better. It's slightly more organized. Here, and I'm going to move this to the middle so that you can all see, or attempt to see what I'm doing. There we go. That's a little bit better, although it's not helping the camera. So I'm just kind of squeezing the garlic between my fingers to get the skin to come off. I think I've spent more time peeling garlic in this class than anything else. Okay. Microplane, so same process as before. And if you use your microplane as much as I do, it's not super sharp, so I really don't have to worry about cutting my fingers. But it still works. So there you can see the grated garlic. Okay, one more. Oh, I started on the wrong side. Okay, so that's, I don't know, a couple teaspoons. So that's going to go into the bowl. And then we'll do our piece of ginger. Ginger is a little bit denser than garlic, so you have to kind of work it a little bit more to really grate it. It takes a little bit longer. But it is a really pretty yellow color. I'm also shaking this entire table. The other thing, and this goes for like grating cheese or anything that you're using mechanical force against a blade, the smaller the surface area that's touching the blade, the easier it's going to be and less resistance for you to push it across the blade and actually grate this. So if as I go, I eventually will have a large flat surface and it starts to get a lot of friction and it's harder to push it, which makes it more likely that you'll cut yourself. So as I go, I'll try to, rotate this so that the thinner or pointier piece of this is what I'm actually pushing against the blade. So once it kind of flattens out, I'll then rotate it and put the the pointy part. Oops. So there you can see we're getting a good bit of ginger. I may not do this whole piece. You can also buy grated ginger.
Skin gets grated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of it too, like the skin you can see is kind of coming off here on the top, and I can sort of discard it. There's way less skin than actual ginger, and it's going to get mixed into the dressing, so you won't even notice that it's there. Okay, I think that's good enough. We have a little piece of garlic paper. And then I do need a whisk. Should I use this ridiculous gigantic one?
Yes. Or I'll find you one.
Actually, I don't think that's going to work. Not for that bowl.
I'm gonna wash this for you.
Thank you.
Can you show the ridiculous one on the...
Yeah. This is a little bit much. I mean, that could... I'll wait for the regular whisk. Okay, so while that's happening, I don't think I brought sugar, but that's okay. We can skip it unless we have some floating back here, or maybe at the coffee station. Do we have some sugar? Beautiful. Got it. So it's a teaspoon of sugar. You can adjust this according to taste. That's about a teaspoon. It's just enough to kind of balance out the acidity. Make sure to give the co-op back their sugar when we're done. A teaspoon of Diamond Crystal kosher salt. I don't want to put soy sauce in my salt, so I'm going to do this. And because I'm doing a double recipe, I'm going to do 2 of these. It's a lot of dressing, so I know it seems like a lot of salt, but we are going to be dressing a lot of cabbage. Okay, ginger, garlic, sugar, salt, soy. We did the vinegar. So sesame oil, 10 tablespoons again, because we're doubling the recipe.
Is that toast?
Yeah, it's toasted sesame oil. And this is a really good condiment for dressings and things. You don't want to add this. You would never cook in this because the heat would kind of destroy the delicate flavor of the toasted sesame. I might actually end up using this whole bottle. We're doing, what did I say, 10? 4, 5. Should we count together? Yeah, I think we're about out. I used all of my sesame oil. That's okay. No, it's just the tip on this is meant to, it's not meant to pour lots. I stopped counting.
I think that's 9.
Okay. Thank you, audience, for your help. Okay. And then 2 tablespoons of tahini and we're done. And then I'm going to whisk this together. The nice thing about measuring my oil first is the tahini glides right off of the tablespoon, or at least better than it would if I didn't have oil in it. Okay. And now I'm just going to whisk all this together and try not to splash it everywhere. And so you can see that it's emulsifying. So the tahini is kind of breaking up and mixing into the oil. I'm also breaking up the grated garlic and ginger into this. And it should almost look like it should look like liquidy peanut butter. That's the official status that you're looking for. Okay. So that covers us there. I'm going to split this between 2 bowls. This is our other one. This bowl is much smaller, so we'll see how much slaw we can actually fit in there. The next thing is our star ingredient, our shiitake mushrooms. So I'm going to clear my cutting board a little bit. Move that aside. So the thing I really like about shiitake is they're kind of the classic traditional, shape of a mushroom. So you have, the stem and the cap, and I like to cut them crosswise so you really get that kind of cross section of mushroom. The only thing I'm going to do to kind of prep these is the base where, the stem hits the dirt is kind of tough. So we're just going to cut those off. And it's literally like the last, maybe 1/4 inch of the mushroom. This one you can see it a little bit clearer. It's got kind of a sort of film on it. It's really sort of raggedy looking, and you can even squeeze it, and it doesn't have as much sort of spongy texture as the rest of the mushroom. So it's really just it's a texture thing. It doesn't seem like it would be pleasant to eat, so we're not going to eat it.
Sometimes with shiitakes, they have really scrawny, wiry stems. Should you use them?
So the question was, sometimes shiitake have really sort of wiry, scraggly stems. If that's the case, it might be that they got kind of dried out. Maybe they were sitting out for a while. Yeah, don't use the stems. It's when you're cooking, it's something that you're going to eat. So you should use your personal preference and make something that you're going to enjoy. So if you find that the stems are too stringy, or maybe the mushrooms that you happen to buy have really sort of tough, stringy stems, then just cut them off. And then you can use them in a broth, similar to how I mentioned about the base of the oyster mushrooms. We're doing okay on time. This is really thrilling and repetitive. Almost there. I keep seeing my own hand in the background on the screen, and I keep thinking that you're waving at me, Michael, in my peripheral vision. Okay, so as far as cutting these, let me give you a good view, Susan. So I do it upside down so that, one, the mushroom stays stable on the board. But I want to cut it, in sort of cross section like this so that when it's cut and when I get to the stem, I try to cut through the stem. So you get a really pretty cross section so that, it looks like a mushroom. And that's all we're really going to do. So I'm going to start slicing through these. And since I'm left-handed, I'm going to, well, although I'm left-handed, but I use my right hand for a knife. But I'm just going to sort of shift this around to make this a little bit easier. And then what I might do is maybe another bowl that I could, let's see if we have a bowl floating around. This will work. So that I'm not putting these on the table. You can talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing this. I'll try to chop quickly and not cut myself.
From Zoom, you might want to mention that 4 tablespoons is 1/4 cup, and 8 is 1/2 cup, and 3 teaspoons is 1 tablespoon.
Okay, so we have a math whiz in the Zoom call. Yeah, it's easier to aggregate, 8 tablespoons. What did they say it is?
8 tablespoons and half.
Yes.
Okay, so there you go. So when you're multiplying the recipe, since I did a double recipe, you could do a 1/2 cup instead of 8 tablespoons. But what's the fun in that? So I'm cutting these like a 1/4 inch. The thing about slaws and salads, or really any dish that you're making, is that in order to evenly distribute something that you're mixing together, it helps if all the parts and pieces are roughly the same size. So you'll notice too when I open that bag of peppers that they're also about a 1/4 inch thick, and roughly the same size as the shape that I'm cutting the mushrooms. I'll try to move a little bit faster. I just didn't want to cut these ahead because they would have, dried out. So it's better if they're cut fresh for a salad.
Someone asked if they should julienne the pepper.
Yeah, so the pepper is, and I'll open it so you can see. So I cut the peppers. This is just a red bell pepper. Cut them in half and took the seeds out. And then just slice them really thin. I did it crossways so you can kind of see like the shape of the pepper. So again, like depending on how you cut vegetables or fruit for that matter, changes the appearance. So the reason I did it this way is because it looks like a bell pepper. So when we throw all this together, these are roughly the same thickness and kind of general size as the mushrooms. And now I've put peppers all over my board. Clean up a little bit. Okay, we're almost done with these mushrooms. The other thing I'm going to chop up is the herbs. And so we have both cilantro and mint. The only thing that's going to be different between the way I treat them is mint has really thick, kind of woody stems. So I'm going to pull the mint leaves off of the stems. But cilantro is pretty tender. So other than like the very base of the stems, for the most part, you don't really need to like pick the leaves off. I'm just going to kind of chop all of it up and throw it in. And that's really it for this salad, other than the cabbage, or slaw as we're calling it. The final thing that we can talk about is sort of crunchy toppings. So if you're familiar with the Co-op, in the I don't know if you'd call it like the snack aisle or the bulk aisle, actually. There are lots of different roasted and raw, nuts and seeds. So for this, I have a couple different things. There's some Thai flavored roasted cashews. The other ones, these have a little bit of it's sort of a caramelized sort of sweet coating on them with some sesame seeds. I don't know exactly what's in them because it doesn't have like a full ingredients list because it's just in the bulk aisle, but they're really delicious. The other thing, if you have like a nut allergy, pumpkin seeds are really great. The co-op sells tamari roasted pumpkin seeds, or you can get raw ones. I would usually spring for the roasted though, because they're a lot crunchier and have a lot more flavor. The other thing that we're going to throw onto this is some toasted sesame seeds. Again, you want to go for toasted so that you get, some nice crunchy flavor and or nice crunchy texture, and then also some flavor. The toasting really brings that out. Okay, 3 mushrooms left. We're almost there. The other thing is this dish is, it holds up pretty well. A lot of salads don't, but cabbage is pretty hardy. Mushrooms are hardy. Peppers also, that this will last in the fridge for a couple of days. The only thing I would recommend is not putting any of the crunchy toppings on your leftovers. Like wait until you're like ready to eat it. The other thing that's really great about this is if it does sort of get too soggy, or if it's been hanging out for a while, or you're just tired of it, you can dump all of it into a skillet and just make a stir fry. And the dressing and all of it can go in. Okay, mushrooms are done.
What about the cabbage stem? Do you cut it and use it, or just cut it?
I usually pitch it, but you could save that, again, if you're doing like a mushroom broth or even like a bone broth or chicken broth. How are we doing on time? We're okay. I'll show you how I typically cut cabbage. So this is a quarter. I mean, the cabbage that they had downstairs was like this big. So I ended up not using all of it. But when you cut it in quarters, the stem is really dense and hard and not really edible. But you could save that if you wanted to throw it into a stock pot to make broth. So usually once I quarter this, I just sort of cut down to remove the stem. And then to get nice, really thin slices of cabbage, I just peeled off like the outer layers, and you can kind of flatten it and then run through it with your knife to get nice, even slices of cabbage. This is a little long, so I might actually do this. Cut that in half, and that'll make it easier to chop through this faster. And again, I'm doing like, quarter inch or so thick slices of the cabbage. So it's roughly, again, kind of the same size as, the peppers and the other things that I'm cutting up. So I'm going to actually throw some of this in the bowl. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to chop the rest of this right now. We're going to get both of our bowls and start mixing this slaw together. So I'm going to start with my cabbage. And this gallon bag is about a half of a really big head of cabbage. So I'm only going to use half of this so that I have space in the bowl to actually mix this around. This is about 3 bell peppers worth. The recipe only calls for 1, so I'm just going to use about a third of that. It also calls for some sliced green onions. This is 2 bunches, so I'm just going to use half of this. And then I had about a pound of shiitake. The recipe calls for a half a pound, so I'm going to use half of this in each of these bowls. I'm a little worried that bowl might not be able to handle. So we may need to find some extra bowls, and then we'll serve this. And then let's get some, thank you. I might actually, 2 big spoons would be better than that. Those aren't really. Yep, perfect. Here, I'll just use these 2. This is good. So I'm just using 2 large spoons because all our dressing is at the bottom. So again, you want to, I didn't leave myself a ton of room. Kind of dig down and sort of pull up from the center to try to get the dressing. Use a very big bowl. Pro tip. And then you really just want to let this sit for like, 5 minutes or so that the mushrooms can soak up the dressing. Oh, I'm forgetting something. Herbs. So the mint. How many different labels and packaging can it have? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so mint, you can see it's got like a really thick stem and it's kind of tough. You don't want to eat that. So we're just going to pull off the more tender parts where the leaves are.
Is that peppermint or spearmint?
It's just mint. It's not peppermint or spearmint. Peppermint and spearmint would have sort of a candy cane flavor. I don't know that it would really taste that great in this, but you can always experiment and try things. Yeah, this is just regular old mint. The Co-op has spearmint. Yeah, for whatever reason, recently I've had a hard time finding mint at the Co-op, that they sell out really fast. So I had to come back and buy this morning. All right, we have 4 minutes. So I'm going to stop tearing mint so that we can finish mixing up the slaw. But what I do want to show you is the cilantro, which has been hanging out for a while. It's a little wilty, but that's okay. It's still going to taste good. If I can get this rubber band off. There we go. So I'm just going to take a pretty sharp knife and I'm going to hold the base of the stems and just kind of run the knife across. Because again, cilantro, the stems are really tender, so I'm not going to worry about pulling the leaves off. And I'm just going to kind of bunch this together and just give it a very rough chop. There's a little bit of cabbage and ginger mixed in there too. And I think the recipe calls for like a cup-ish of chopped leaves of each of these. But you can kind of do it to taste. So we're going to toss this, and then it's done. We'll throw some toasted sesame seeds on it. And I'll fetch our ragu from the stove so you can see what it looks like as a final dish.
Somebody said it looks delicious.
It smells really good. I can smell the mint and the cilantro. Somebody in the Zoom said it looks really delicious. Okay, so there's our slaw. I'm gonna just rinse this plate really quickly. And I'm gonna serve up a little bit of our polenta. Thank you. So the polenta is just it's really cornmeal. It's kind of a rough, sort of a roughly ground cornmeal. This, I use a 6-to-1 ratio of liquid to corn. Typically you use 4. But all the recipes I neglected to mention that we made today are vegan. So there's no dairy, there's no meat, no animal products. So normally like a creamed polenta would have some cream or some half and half or some dairy in it. This has a little bit of almond milk, water, and then it also has some vermouth. So 2 parts of the 6 parts of liquid are almond milk and vermouth, and the rest is water. And then you really just bring it to a boil and then let it kind of simmer with the cornmeal. Well, it's not really cornmeal. Cornmeal is much finer. Polenta is a much sort of thicker, kind of heavier grain. It's not ground as finely as cornmeal. and cook it down until it's really smooth and creamy, and just a nice consistency. And then we're going to serve our ragu. This one, see, I didn't add as much water, so we're going to use the one that I made earlier. And this also has some shiitake in it. And then I'll go ahead and put this on the table. And then we also have our pâté that you can eat with a little bit of bread. And that is mushrooms 3 ways. We're done. So we're at time, but we'd definitely like to keep the Zoom open for a few minutes, and I'm going to ask Winson to come back up. And if anyone has any questions about what we made today or about mushrooms, we can allot a few minutes for some questions from the Zoom or from in person. Yes.
We have somebody showing theirs.
Oh, can you share it on the screen so everybody can see? Amazing. Oh, I love that.
Wow, that looks amazing.
So the question was, is there a mushroom season, like a best time of year to buy them?
I mean, I would say nowadays a lot of the mushrooms are probably grown indoors, so really pretty much it's available all year round. I would say there's certain type of mushrooms that grow better in the summer, like pink oyster mushrooms are better. And then some are cold weather mushrooms, like king trumpets are probably better colder. But in general, I mean, most of these indoor farms are all temperature controlled anyways. If you're buying stuff that is outdoors, obviously, summer, fall, when there's a lot of rain, you usually can forage stuff. That's when it's best. When it gets too cold, you're not going to be able to find them. And there was one more thing I was going to say. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think, but I encourage everyone to eat mushrooms all year round. I know people think mushroom is a fall winter dish, but you can eat it all year round. Yeah.
You can put it in a slaw, so it's not, it doesn't always have to be like a stew or something that's really savory and cooked down. They are great in salads.
Are there mushrooms that are better uncooked than cooked?
So the question was, are there mushrooms that are better uncooked than cooked? I don't know. Actually, I've only ever done in like a slaw like this, shiitake or like a cremini or a button mushroom. So I'm not really sure if there's others. I'll default to.
I mean, I think depends on the texture. I think like certain mushrooms are just harder to eat if it's uncooked. So you might want to braise it down or just cook it down. But yeah, in general, I think if you're buying mushrooms like at a store, it's generally pretty clean. But if you're foraging, I would typically try and cook it first, just in case, or at least make sure that you clean it properly. Yeah.
Anything in the Zoom chat?
Do you grow matsutake mushrooms?
You can't grow those indoors. Yeah, those are all just available outdoors.
And what kind is it? Matsutake?
Matsutake, it's.
I'm not familiar with those.
It's a very fancy, expensive mushroom. And
a fancy, expensive mushroom.
Yeah.
What about
Maitake you can grow indoors.
Okay.
Yes, it takes 3 months. It takes a while. It's difficult to grow maitake. So the stuff that you can only grow indoors, I would say stuff that is available outdoors that's only forageable are things like morels, chanterelles, matsutake. Those are predominantly all outdoor only. And the major difference, just not to get too technical, is they generally rely on another tree. They grow symbiotically with a tree, whereas the mushrooms that we have, like oyster mushrooms, they're more a decomposing type mushroom. So they decompose waste outdoors or indoors, and as part of their nutrients to grow. Yeah, that's why you can only truly use those indoors. Yeah.
When you said you use scraps, do you use only dead vegan scraps, or do you use meat scraps?
Predominantly only like veggie scraps. Yeah.
So the question was about growing mushrooms. Do we use the vegan scraps, or the scraps are, it's I guess organic material, but no meat or no animal products or anything like that.
No, it's hard to grow on fat usually. Yeah, fat doesn't contribute well as a substrate. Yeah.
Is it the same ecosystem rule for lettuce mushrooms?
That's a good question. I believe depends on depends on the type. I'm not that one. I'm not sure. I think so, yes, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
Any other questions? Everyone's just hungry.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
We so for folks in the room, we have some.
William, can you mention your website and Instagram?
Yeah. So I write a food blog and put out a newsletter, sort of quarterly. It depends on how much time I have. It's adventurouscooks.com, and that's my same handle on Instagram.
And where can they visit the mushroom?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can find us on Instagram, Afterlife Mushrooms. We will
Say it
open
one
up
more time.
Afterlife Mushrooms, but we will open it up likely for visitors in the future. Not yet, but we'll figure it out how we can do that in the future. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you ever share other recipes or like a newsletter or anything?
Yes, yeah, as I mentioned. So like quarterly I put out a newsletter and it has other recipes and various things, food related usually, to life in general or what I'm cooking at the moment. So I just sent one out with all of these, mushroom recipes. So those are on my website. They're also on the Food Co-op Cooks website and our Eventbrite page. So if you want these recipes, they're there with all the ingredients. You can download them and let me know how they are, if there's a typo. Yeah, so next month on February 18th, we're doing a cheese pairing and tasting class with Yuri Weber is the co-op's cheese buyer, fine foods, olives, all the fancy stuff. So Yuri's going to be with us next month. Susan and who's that? And Jenny will be here, two of our other squad members, to sort of talk to Yuri, and they'll be putting together some cheese boards and answering questions about cheese and what are good cheeses for melting. And Yuri's a wealth of knowledge. And apparently, what is it, like 500 pounds of cheese a week or something was it 5,000 that the co-op sells? It's in the flyer for the class. I just can't remember the exact number, but it's a lot of cheese. Yeah, so that'll be here in the kitchen, and it'll also be broadcast on Zoom. So if you can't be with us, you can just look at all the cheese. Yeah, and it's up on our Eventbrite page. You can RSVP for a seat for that class, and that's Wednesday, February 18th. And then we'll upload more classes as they come available. But we do it every month except for August and December. It's usually the third Wednesday. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.